Good afternoon. Continuing from yesterday about possible addiction to economic growth. There was a statement by a businessman in Forbes magazine. Although it was meant in a light-hearted way, I guess, to be funny, it hits it right on the head anyway. It illustrates very well the addictive attitude of which I'm talking. He's talking about the type of Chinese businessman with whom he would like to work. And this is what he said. He's not interested in cleaning up the environment or in saving the people of Guangdong or in affirmative action. He's interested in making money. And that was supposed to be funny, but it's exactly what it seems to me to be the problem. Looking for economic growth. When this is done, instead of looking to help by whatever the business is, it should be to help people first, and then, of course, you have to make some money. But that's not your primary interest, and you don't want to make too much money. You don't want to make more than you need, because then it's an addiction. If you don't need the money, why would you be so interested in making it? In his book, Gore also mentioned the misuse of international... Oh no, I already said that yesterday. Okay. Today, let's talk about favoritism. Favoritism just refers to rewards, basically, but toward groups, maybe, instead of just an individual, although sometimes it's an individual. Favoritism is another aspect of a codependent situation. Sometimes there may be vacillation between favoritism and disfavoring of a certain group. An example of this is in the early 90s, the disfavoring of American small business and small farmers in regard to loans. Meanwhile, entrepreneurs in Mexico were being favored. In other words, they were being given loans. They were getting the reward of having loans. That's what everybody wanted, I guess, at that time. And international financial institutions have given large loans for infrastructure in Mexico. They gave them around that time. And that was connected with the free trade agreement. Also in Mexico, loans for investment purposes were given around that time. So they were favoring Mexican on that side of the border with these loans, with money in general, with the rewards of the financial rewards, and they were disfavoring the small business and small farmers on the American side. In other words, the local. They were local, and they were trying to get the Mexicans, I guess what they were trying to get was for people in Mexico to trade across the border. That was part of it. And then there were other things going on because the Americans had their business in Mexico, and they were they were going to send products back to the United States from Mexico. So the big corporations went down to Mexico and started building a lot of new factories. The Mexicans were influenced by that because they had to close up their factories because they couldn't compete. The Americans in Mexico were getting, those corporations were getting loans, but the ones in the United States, the small ones who didn't go across the border, they needed money and they couldn't get it. Needed loans. They felt they needed loans. Okay. Favoritism doesn't just seem to help one side over the other, but rather it makes changes within the side it favors. An example of this is the favoring of the church in the 4th century. This would be the Christian Catholic Church at that time. by, I don't know if they called it Catholic at that time, but it was the beginning of the what became the Catholic Church. It was favored by Constantine. Rich people could save money by joining the church. They did so, and thereafter the emphasis in the church on sharing for the common good steadily decreased, and the perceived dichotomy between spirit and matter increased. So what I'm imagining is that the rich people would say, oh, now you don't have to share your riches because that's too materialistic. For the church should be all just spiritual. So we don't have to share anything, or who knows what the talk was. But it's hard to imagine back such a long time ago. But the idea is that it changed the way things happened within the church. And before that, they were sharing a lot more. Okay, the next point has to do with illusion. Tolstoy wrote about exaggerated flattery of Russian rulers, in other words, Tsars, which paid the flatterers off. So they got taken care of in the process. But it caused the leaders to continue to be very much out of touch with reality. A type of codependency existed between the czars and these flatterers. So that is an illusion, giving a person an illusion that everything is just fine when it's not just fine. They're out of touch with reality. When the writer Anne Wilson Schaef talks about the addictive process in organizations, she mentions the illusory nature of an addictive system. The realization and admission of this illusory state is very necessary for recovery. She points to a moral base in keeping an organization from being addictive. Money, which would be like a reward, should not be at the center of the organization's purpose. Rather, she advises integrity or other things, such as just making a good product in order to improve in whatever way we can, improve people's lives. But the main purpose should not be money. Of course, you need to earn money to pay your bills and so on, but that should not be the center of profit, should not be the main purpose. And she mentions this realization of illusion as the beginning of making a paradigm shift. So once a person or an organization, the leaders start realizing what the illusion is, then they can change the whole paradigm, the whole structure of their organization. Gore mentions the need for a new paradigm in regard to, quote, the current relationship between human civilization and the earth. This was way back in the early 90s that he talked about this. A combination of the two ideas would give us a disillusionment with the addictive aspects of civilization, leading to a new paradigm. Wouldn't that be nice if we got a new paradigm? Tolstoy points out the effect of the Tsar's environment, their surroundings, on their illusionary view of reality. Anyone surrounded by a similar environment, if you had everybody telling you, oh, you're just wonderful just the way you are, even if you're falling apart, they'd be telling you that, anybody would react in an equally absurd way. These Tsars were acting in an absurd way. Part of the self-aggrandizement that they did for these Tsars, and another aspect of these Tsars, was the preparation for mass murder, in other words, the preparation for war, without the seeming realization of what they were really doing. And this was happening in their country. They were trained from childhood on up in these so-called arts, the art of killing someone. This is an example of the evolution of a person. So as they're growing up, they're thinking. They're being taught to be ignorant, in other words. This isn't hurting anybody. This is war. We have to have war. This is helping our country. For love of your country, do this. Linguistics is part of this illusion. This brings us to the linguistical aspects of this phenomenon of illusion. It's carried on through the centuries through the use of and with the aid of expressions which hide rather than illuminate the reality involved. An example of this is military and war terminology. Peace through strength, that was the saying, maybe by Bush or maybe by Ronald Reagan, means lots of military preparation and threats, etc. That's peace. And euphemisms about realities of war have been going on for centuries. This deception makes it difficult, if not impossible, for people to see reality. In other words, they think, oh, war is a necessity, we have to have it. Okay, go ahead. They don't even think beyond the word war and see mass murder, children, women, people being abused, all sorts of torture, who knows what. They don't think about that. They just say, oh, it's for love of country. People just simplify when they're thinking, and it doesn't help them see reality. In Tolstoy's example, it was the Tsar. An example of a misleading expression in the area of economics is the GDP. If it rises, it may be simply because of the receipt of many loans. They're going to come due someday, and then it won't look so good. And it doesn't include a lot of immeasurable costs, such as the loss of natural resources. And this brought Gore back to the basic need for a new paradigm, this time behind all the faulty measurements. This paradigm would not be on a material level, but on a more spiritual level. In other words, those forests back there, maybe you can't measure them, but they got a lot of value. You could talk about them, but it'd be pretty hard to physically measure them. Okay, that's all for today. I'll continue next time, and thank you for listening. Goodbye.